So today we come to Ruth chapter 3. The story continues. And this book that we've been studying for the last few weeks, this is a masterpiece of short storytelling. It showcases so far what we've seen is human devotion. We're seeing the kind of foundations for romance to come into play. And at the heart of all of it is God's faithfulness and loving kindness. In chapter 1, as we kind of walk through that chapter, the story of Ruth demonstrated God's providence, his oversight, his power over all things, and seeing, and trusting his promises that no matter the situation, no matter how hard life gets, that God is still moving and working. Even in the midst of our unfaithfulness, of the unfaithfulness of his people, that God remains faithful. Chapter 2, we start to see how God, his grace is cultivating faithfulness in his people. That God, when he is faithful, when God is steadfast and sure, that what that produces in his people is faithfulness. That we begin to reflect the character and person of God more, not because of our own strength, abilities, and righteousness, but because God is so faithful and so true. And Ruth is showing us that this is not some just ethereal, theological, abstract concept, but this is a grounded reality that we experience in everyday life. That faith in Jesus, that salvation and redemption is not just this far off abstract concept, but is something for us to experience right here today. And Ruth is a beautiful illustration of that. And then in chapter 3, we're going to see that God is going to continue to reveal loyalty and his desire to bring blessing to his people. And that we're going to, one of the great things that as we study scripture more, as we dive deeper into God's word, we see that blessing is so much bigger than what we often culturally think it is. It's so much more comprehensive, which is good news because it takes away from blessing as something we just measurable and tangible and monetary type of things and prosperity like that. But blessing is really this beautiful restoration of fullness and wholeness with God, which is worth way more than any of those things. And he's going to show that and illustrate that through Ruth and Boaz here. So from the beginning of this story that begins in famine, unfaithfulness, lack of trust in the Lord, what we see is that from this dark opening of Naomi's story, Ruth's mother-in-law, that what's going to emerge is a tale of God's faithfulness and one woman's unshakable devotion. And that's what we're seeing start to really play out now. Meredith just so wonderfully walked us through chapter 2 last week and really even highlighting the Hallmark movie likeness of this story, that it's almost so beautiful, it's absurd. That it's almost comical. There's no way things line up this way. And what's amazing is when we look at someone like Boaz and we're going to see his character play out, we're going to look at it and be like, there's no way someone is that gracious and that good. And that's where we see, that's giving us a foretaste of God. So yes, there is one who is that good, and that's what this is all pointing to. And so Ruth chapter 3 brings us now to a interesting part of this story, right? So Ruth has gone into the fields. She's been shown this wonderful favor by Boaz. He's protected her even from stuff that was culturally allowed. Doesn't mean it's okay. Doesn't mean it's godly. Just because the culture says okay and puts a stamp of approval does not mean it's faithfulness to the Lord. And so there are things like even the assault of the women workers in the fields was allowed. And Boaz steps in to intervene to protect Ruth as she's doing this. And he's showing this graciousness to her. And now she goes home and Naomi's like trying to help control the situation. Okay, let's get you. We got to figure out this husband thing. You were faithful to me. Let me figure this out for you. We're going to do this. We've got some family members that can be really big in this. And we're going to talk more about what that means here in a second. And so now it brings us to the next stage, that after Ruth has been shown favor by Boaz, what is Naomi and Ruth? What happens next? And so that brings us to chapter 3, verse 1. Naomi, her mother-in-law, now remember, Naomi is functioning as the head of the household here because her husband, Elimelech, has died. Then her sons died while they were in Moab, this pagan country. And so Ruth was one of the two daughters-in-law, and she followed Naomi back to Bethlehem and had this, not just this faithfulness to Naomi, but this faithfulness to the Lord moment where she's like, where you go, you go. Where you stay, I'll stay. Where you move, I'll move. Where your people will be my people and your God will be my God. I'm not just taking on your culture. I'm one to worship the God you worship. Which is profound because everything we know about Naomi has been anything but faithful to the Lord at this point. So Naomi now says to her daughter, her mother-in-law says to her, my daughter, should I not seek rest for you that it may be well with you? Is not Boaz our relative with whose young women you were? So what Naomi's doing here is she's saying, hey, look, my job for you as now the head of this household is to seek for you that it would be well with you. And what she's saying in this Hebrew phrase here, that it may be well with you, Naomi's saying, I want to remove the reproach of widowhood from you and everything that comes with. That's what I want to take. All that you've lost and all that you're lacking, I want to be the one to help remove that from you. So as a result, what would happen is this would solve Ruth's destitution and provide for her needs, because as of now, in this culture, it was all reliant upon males, men passing that down. And to have just a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law that did not have to take place, because she could have gone back to her country, gone back to her family, taken the easiest way out. She left everything to come to Bethlehem. And now, so Naomi's saying, okay, now it's on me. I've got to provide for you. Does that kind of ring a bell too of our need? Like we feel that, right? Wanting to provide. That's not out of the realm of normalcy for us as people to want to provide, especially for our children, for those parents out there, to want to provide for your kids, to provide the best things, to not have them suffer and hurt. So this makes sense culturally. This is, what else was she to do? Especially with Ruth being so far from home. And so then, how does Boaz then play into this as a relative of Naomi's family? So Naomi's the one from Bethlehem, not Ruth. So this is not Ruth's biological relative in this sense. This is a relative of Naomi and Elimelech, right? And so this is where this term that Meredith mentioned last week called Kinsmen Redeemer comes into play. And so what this cultural thing at this point in time, a kinsman redeemer is a male relative tasked with preserving a family's legacy. Okay, this is what they were to do. A kinsman redeemer, kinsman, relative, redeemer, to redeem, to purchase back a family's legacy by redeeming property, providing heirs, and protecting vulnerable members. This is what a kinsman redeemer, their role was in this culture to do. So that's why Naomi is like, ooh, Boaz, because he owns all the field that she was in. Boaz is well off. Dude ain't doing too bad. And she's like, yeah, let's, go with that guy. He can get all this stuff. And then, because also, this helps Naomi. Because think, with Ruth being her daughter-in-law, what Boaz could then do is everything that Naomi could have or would have or did lose and being widowed, and then leaving for years, over a decade, Boaz would have the ability to purchase and get all that Naomi lost back too. So this isn't just for the benefit of Ruth. Naomi is a huge benefactor in this situation too. And so that's what Boaz, as a close relative, could do, that he would be able to fill this kinsman redeemer role for Ruth and Naomi to buy back all of that too. Not just provide moving forward, but restore Naomi in the process. And so that helps us set the stage of like, why is Ruth so bent on Boaz, this relative, being the one to redeem? Like, because she didn't send him to anyone else, right? She didn't send Ruth to anyone else. She didn't send her to another field. She went to kinsmen, close people. So we pick up at the second half of verse 2. See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor where you just were at. You know this area. You've been out there. Wash therefore, this is Naomi, wash therefore and anoint yourself, put on your cloak and go down on the threshing floor, but do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. Okay, right? You're like, okay, her mother-in-law is saying, all right, go at night, but wait till he's eaten and had some drinks in him. Then reveal yourself to him. And you're already going, right? We're on the same page then. Gets a little more sketchy. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies. Okay? Don't reveal yourself. Hide until he lies down. Moms, I want you to think about telling your daughters this kind of information. Hey, see that guy over there that we're related to? Go there after he's ate and drank at night and it's dark, and then hide in the corner and wait till he lays down. Then come out. Then you go, what is this? Then go uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do. Hold up now. And she replied, all that you say, I will do. So, right? We're like, man, Old Testament is like exciting. So go do this. And then uncover his feet and lie down next to him in the dark after he's been eating and drinking. And do whatever he tells you to. Now, there's two sides of this too. This places both Ruth and Boaz in a very vulnerable and compromising situation. It does. And so we're going to start at the top here. What Naomi is beginning to do now first is she's trying to control the situation. She wants, we already know, Kinsmen Redeemer. We now know what she's referring to. So what is she going to do? I'm going to try to make this happen, right? But this has been Naomi's pattern the whole story so far. Naomi taking the situation into her own hands. Ever since Elimelech has died, that's what she's done. Tried to take things. She sent Ruth out in the first place in chapter 2. And then now she's sending her out. And here's what's interesting. She is putting Ruth in both these situations, chapter 2, chapter 3, into situations that would be put her in harm's way. Ruth is in danger's place in both of these situations where she is exposed and vulnerable in every sense of the word. She is literally at the beckoning call and at the mercy of whatever Boaz says. Any of it. And Ruth continues to say, all you say, I'll do. Now, where Naomi's at, because I wanted to look at all sides. Sometimes we kind of zero in on certain things. And here's the thing, too. As we walk through Scripture, there's been a tendency when I grew up, a lot of what we had is like, there was always like, you're the hero of the story. So it's always like, oh, like, what's your Goliath? Like, I'm always David. Like, I would actually say I'm probably more like the Philistines and like Goliath than I am a faithful David, even an unfaithful David. You know, we always put ourselves we always look at the disciples. I'm a disciple of Jesus in the New Testament when they're faithful, but when they're being kind of knuckleheaded or not catching it, we're like, oh, no. I would never do that. How could they question the Lord? How could they not get it? So we could come to Ruth and be like, oh, I'm just Ruth, faithful and trusting the Lord, and I'm just going to do whatever. I'm like, okay, let's be fair here. Sometimes we can be like that. But also, when I read this story, if I'm honest about my life and my sinful disposition, I'm actually more like Naomi in this than I am anyone. When situations in the world happen, I take control and I try to make results happen. Same thing's going on here that Naomi's doing. And it's our inherent human weakness tends to shift our dependence from God onto self-reliance. That in our human condition, our sinful nature has taken it to where we don't trust the Lord. We trust ourselves to make things happen. And then really what we do is just hope that the Lord will bless it later. Naomi's trying to control this situation. She's trying to make it happen. But what we're seeing happening behind the scenes is that God is moving faithfully, even if Naomi's got some questionable things going on here. Because that's what she's doing. I mean, she instructs Ruth, hey, wow, you got his attention. Now what I want you to do is I want you to make yourself look as good as possible. Smell as good as possible. I want you to doll yourself up. And I want you to go and wait until this guy's been drinking and he's laying down. And then I want you to approach him and lay down next to him. Now, I do want to give some credence to this too. There is no universal agreement at all on biblical commentaries across the board on what Naomi's actual intentions are here. It doesn't say. No commentary. In fact, most theologians would say, probably, but we can get caught up in it so much that we can miss then what's going on. We can get caught up in the nefariousness of the situation, that what we also could miss is like that narratively what's going on here is if we're like I think we all were when we read those verses, we're exactly where the author wants us to be. What in the world is about to happen in this situation? Because this seems like it is set up for nothing but negative things, bad things. Because what's interesting, though, is what Ruth is kind of doing in this, the preparation. Like the situation seems nefarious, but the preparation and all this stuff is what would happen when people would prepare for marriage proposals. So it's not just like culturally, and what you would see is that it's not just she's trying to get her ready for her to just go sleep with Boaz necessarily, is that this is what would be done to prepare for marriage proposal type thing. So that's where you see there's a tension in the dynamic here of what's going on, and that's okay, because let this text speak for itself and it'll sort out what really is the important thing for us to focus on. So if we're feeling that anxiety and confusion, we are right where the author wants us to be. Because regardless of that stuff, what the narrative is going to show is God is working behind the scenes and what faithfulness looks like even in the midst of what could be considered nefarious situations. So we move to verse 6 now. Ruth says, okay, so she goes down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law commanded. All right, and Ruth would have been made aware by this point that some of the stuff she's doing places her very vulnerable things. But she said, even, I will do everything that you ask me to. She has vowed this unwavering faithfulness to Naomi. And even said, may the Lord judge me harshly if I'm unfaithful to you. So she's being faithful to Naomi. And when Boaz had eaten and drunk and his heart was merry, right? I mean, this guy's doing well. He's not eating scraps and, drinking the stuff that only college kids try to have. He's got the good stuff. He's feeling good. He's had a great meal, had a few good drinks. And his heart was merry, and he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. Then she came softly and uncovered his feet and lay down. And at midnight the man was startled, and he turned over, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. See, here's the thing too. She just stayed there. She didn't do anything. She just lie there. She followed the directions to the T. Technically, she did. But she's not crossed certain lines. And he said, who are you? like sometimes, read the Bible like real people, y'all. Please, it's not, sometimes we get too proper and we miss at midnight the man was startled, turned over, and behold, the woman lay at his feet. And he said, who are you? I'm sorry, no human being, if you wake up at midnight after having some good food and good drink, and you wake up and there's someone laying at your feet who are you? Whoa! Who be that? And she answered, I am Ruth, your servant. Who he knows who that is. Spread your wings over me, over your servant, for you are a redeemer. Isn't that an interesting thing that she asked for? Save me. Protect me. Rescue me. And even in the midst of what is a nefarious kind of dynamic, we see that Ruth courageously does and follows Naomi's instructions, approaches Boaz. Because the spreading the cloak is a signal. She's saying, a request for marriage. Take me in that way. Ruth shows here remarkable integrity, even in situations that could potentially lead to unfaithfulness to the Lord. Just because we are in situations that we could go one way or another does not mean that we can't walk through that faithfully still. Because here's the reality. The world is not a faithful world to the Lord by nature. Every single day, every moment we wake up, every place that we go, every conversation we have, every relationship that we're engaged in has a potential to lead to unfaithfulness to the Lord. And in fact, I would argue theologically, already is lean in that direction of unfaithfulness to the Lord because we are in a sinful world by nature. But the work of God in our life can give us strength to remain faithful in the midst of an unfaithful and nefarious situation. Ruth shows that that can be done. Not because Ruth is so amazing. I mean, she's not even from this land. Nobody knew who she was before Naomi came back. And Naomi came back and people were whispering, hey, this is the one who bailed out on us during the famine. This is what the Lord does. He works in our hearts and it changes our lives. It changes who we are, how we move, how we act in a way that we don't lose the uniqueness that God created us with, but yet what we do is we live out the goodness of God that He is building and growing and has given us. This is God's work in our lives. This is God's work in Ruth's life. And so we see her faithful. Now we're going to see Boaz's faithfulness, because in this moment, Boaz has all the power. He has all of it. And he says, may you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. Now this isn't don't think of this as a creepy thing. He's he's saying this is it's just same as Meredith talked about last week. This is more in term of endearment, sweetness, precious. May you be blessed by the Lord. She comes to ask for salvation from Him, and his first response, may the Lord bless you. My daughter, you have made this last kindness greater than the first, in that you have not gone after young man, whether rich or poor. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do all that you ask, for all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman. That's incredible. She is a foreigner in this land. She's a pagan from another country. She came with a woman who had a bad reputation for bailing out. And yet the town even talks this way about her. What does that say? And now it is true that I am a redeemer, and there is a redeemer nearer than I. So this was made, he goes, hey, I am one, but there's one who's even closer related. And if he will redeem you, good, let him do it. But if he will not redeem you, then as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Lie down until the morning. So there's no nefariousness. There's no crossing of lines or boundaries. There's nothing in that sense of physical anything. He says, may you be blessed by the Lord. And there's someone actually closer to you that could do that blessing for you. And if he does it, great, because I'm going to follow the right thing. I'm going to do this the right way. But if he won't, I will be faithful. And so what we can take from this is we see what God has been doing in Ruth's life is that he is at work even when his actions are not immediately visible. That just because we can't see God at work doesn't mean he's not. And in fact, that's good news for us because it means the work that he's doing is even deeper than just the tangible things, because God has got a restoration plan that is greater than anything we could dream of. So any hurt or brokenness or loss that you have in your life, any temptation, any addiction, any of those things, God is going to work in such a way that he's not just going to restore, he's going to restore you to fullness and wholeness. That's not just going to be temporary relief from those things, but to restore wholeness to you for all of eternity. It's so much better. Does it mean sometimes it feels slow here? Yes, it does. Does it mean that sometimes it's out of our control? Absolutely. Life's out of our control anyways. And what Ruth is highlighting here is you trust God because he's working for a greater purpose than you could ever dream or ever imagine. And so Ruth, in this moment, as God is working behind the scenes, she lay at his feet until the morning, but arose before one could recognize another. And he said, let it be known that the woman came to the threshing floor. And he said, bring the garment you're wearing and hold it out. So what does he do now? Hey, hold this out. She held it out and it measured out 6 measures of barley and put it on her. Then she went into the city. And when she came to her mother-in-law and said, how did you fare, my daughter? She told her all that the man had done for her. These 6 measures of barley he gave to me, for he said to me, you must not go back empty-handed to your mother-in-law. He replied, wait, my daughter, until you learn. She replied, wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today. We see a couple quick things happening here too. Boaz then, in his vow here, and prayer that she be blessed, then also blesses her in another way too, and gives her this thing. And what's amazing is he then does this to say, and I want you to bless your mother-in-law too. I want you to bless Naomi. He's providing for both of them. And remember, he is not the Kinsmen Redeemer for them yet. He's in line for it, but there's another that they're going to go to first. So he hasn't even made the commitment that he's the guy, and he's still doing this. And what do we see Naomi's response here? Naomi, the woman of action, the woman of take control, the woman who has tried to do all this says, wait. The first pause of Naomi here. For the man will not rest until he settles the matter. Let's pause for a second. And that closes out the chapter. And we can take a few quick things away from this as we're left on kind of a cliffhanger. First one is this, that we can trust in God's providence. We can trust in God's movement and working. We can trust that he has a plan, that he is working and fulfilling himself. Now, one of the things about trust in the Lord is that means that we let go of control of our own lives in ways that we don't often want to and desire to. And really, trusting in the Lord will result in us running to him. This is gospel 101 principles. I saw this recently too, and I was like, this is great. Like, trust in God. Trust in the good news of Jesus Christ. The gospel message is not, ooh, I messed up. Don't tell dad. Right? Don't tell dad. I messed up. Don't tell dad. The gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ is, I'm in trouble. Go get dad. Dad, help me. I'm desperate. I've got nothing. And we can see the difference playing out in the story in people's lives of those who are trusting in the Lord and those who are taking trust into their own hands. Where are you right now? Are you in a place in life where it's like, nah, don't tell Dad, I've got this. Don't bother Dad with this. Or are we sitting there saying, I'm in trouble. I need Dad. Father, help me. I've got nothing. And if I try to take this on, it's going to be worse. I'm going to be empty. And I'm going to put myself in even more nefarious situations than I was in before. Lord, I want to trust you. Because trusting in God in that way and calling out for him is going to lead to a life that reflects his character. We're not going to look like we have taken life into our own hands. Our life is going to exhibit the character and the person of God. Because that is how we're going to be moving and being worked in and through, is that it will be God himself and not our own inhibitions, own desires, intuitions, habits, any of those things. It will literally be the power of God working in and through the hearts and minds of each one of us. And one of those first steps that if we wonder if we're there, that can help us know. I don't want to say this is prescriptive fully, but one of the big things is when trouble hits. I can't tell Dad. Dad, help me. Trust in God. You can see that playing out. And you're seeing a shift already in Naomi, in her life in this. And as we do that, I just want to encourage you to continue to seek God's will and guidance above all things. Our gospel reading today from the Sermon on the Mount, we're not going to go fully into that passage today. We'll go more, we'll actually go deeper into that. And after Easter, we're going to be hitting this passage more. But I want to say, one of the things is, seek first the kingdom of heaven. It means that we're trusting God and his dwelling place for us for eternity more than anything else here. Trust him. Cry out to him. And when those moments when you don't, Naomi finally shows us an incredible opportunity here. The story isn't done. And she doesn't say, all right, Ruth, here's part B of the plan. Now you're going to do this. She says, wait. When we trust the Lord, we're going to wait for him to answer. You want to know if you're seeking the Lord and his will? Wait for him to answer. And so as we move forward and wrap up the series in the next few weeks, my prayer is that that's what would become the posture of our hearts. This wholehearted, fully trusting and seeking God above all things. And that as a result, God's character would just begin to flow through us in a way that it never has before. That he will produce a greater faithfulness each moment of our lives.